film or series lit your fuse and made you have to tell stories on screen?
I mean, the truth is there are a lot of answers for that. But I wanted to give you one that was maybe outside my normal, outside of Lawrence of Arabia and Badlands and everything else. And I don't talk about Sling Blade enough. I grew up in Arkansas. I grew up in Little Rock. My dad owned a furniture store there. There just really weren't a lot of touch points to films being made in my home state. And I can't underestimate the influence of being able to go watch a film in a theater that was shot, nearby where I grew up, that had people that sounded like relatives of mine, people that sounded like, people that I grew up with. And then to have that film also achieve the level of success that it did, it really seemed to bring down to earth a little bit the idea of being involved in this business. Then if you step back from that impact, the film's just incredible. It's a film that's observant. It's a film that's beautifully directed, and it's hilarious and cruel and real, and also at times feels absurd, but it never feels dishonest. And I think that's something I search for in my work. Something that is entertaining and can live on a giant screen and in a movie theater and attract people. It can attract people to come see it, but at the same time reaches a level of honesty with its character and its storytelling. I mean, any scene with Dwight Yoakam is incredible in that movie, and both hilarious and devastating all at the same time. I would go on later in my life, but in my first film, Shotgun Stories, I was very fortunate to have Natalie Cannerday play the mother of Michael Shannon's side of the family, and she, of course, was the mother in Sling Blade. In terms of performance, though, every single person in that film is doing something interesting. Obviously Billy Bob's performance draws a lot of attention, but when I look at Dwight Yoakam's character, just his character work, he's a guy that I think exists. I think they walk around us, maybe not every day, but certainly where I grew up, this kind of man that is, just has a meanness in them. I've seen it in people. I don't know if that really answers your question. It's not so filmic. It's really, it's almost literary in terms of its approach to character.
Yeah, it does. No, it's a great answer. So as you were on your way up, figuring it out as a filmmaker, what movie or series came along and you watched it and it was so good you just said to yourself, boy, can I really play in this sandbox?
Right. The first time I really remember having an experience was in film school, which makes sense because that's when you're really starting to break down movies, in a very serious way. I'm starting to look at shot construction. I'm starting to just really pay attention to how these things get made. And I think, my freshman or sophomore year, Saving Private Ryan came out, and I went to go watch that, and I watched the opening 20 minutes of that, and I pretty much said to myself, I'll never have the skill level or the technical ability to achieve anything close to that. Like, the amount of things that happen in that opening 20 minutes is it's on another level of technical proficiency and storytelling, because it's not just they pulled off this stunt or they pulled off that stunt. It's the orchestration of all of it together to give you this effect. My grandfather was, I think, D-Day +3, and I walked into that film and I just was, I was blown away. There's also, moments in Heat that feel that way to me, especially the shootout at the end where you're just like, I don't know if I could ever achieve something this kinetic. My films are very, some people say classical, maybe stayed, pretty quiet. It's kind of in part how I kind of wrap my head around the process, but also it's the style that I like. But when I go into a film that has this real kinetic energy it's not there just for the sake of being kinetic. It's there because it's incredible storytelling, visual storytelling. You're putting the puzzle pieces together in a way that I certainly get intimidated by. I would say the first 20 minutes of Saving Private Ryan in film school, and then Heat, the shootout scene in Heat.
Boy, those are two singular examples that you have brought up. And even, a lot of people cite the coffee shop scene. Even that one, the way Michael kind of pushed it, the way he delayed what you were hoping, that meeting between the two guys, it was just so masterfully done, I thought.
It's a brilliant film. And I remember even with Heat in film school, I went to my professor, we were talking about working with actors, and I was like, how do you ever give Al Pacino a note? And he had a really interesting thought. He was like, no. The actors want your thoughts. They want to do great work. You can't be intimidated by them, Jeff. Now, this was a film professor in college, who had never worked with Al Pacino or Robert De Niro, but it stuck with me. It's kind of like, get over yourself. Like you have a job to do, and if you have a thought, go up and tell the actor the thought. So I was thinking a lot about just how I fit into the world of directing, looking at these examples.
Yeah, well, what I remember about Michael Mann saying to me was, because I asked him, because they were such study in contrasts, those two great actors, and he said that basically Al's kind of hyper performance was he'd met with enough detectives where you had to keep an informant from feeling comfortable with you, because then they'd feel like they could play you. And so, and that was the reason why he would all of a sudden come out with something outlandish, and just to keep the guy on his toes. And there was a more likelihood that he was going to get honest answers if he did such a thing when he was talking with his informants.
That makes sense. Did he ever speak about the fact that character was supposed to be on speed? I picked something up through reading Heat 2 that that character was supposed to be taking pills, but they kind of edited the mention of that out in the first film, but it kind of left this performance that felt like it was on speed, but took the context of the actual mention of the pills out. I don't know if Mann's ever mentioned that, but I think it's in Heat 2. I think he mentions him taking pills.
So maybe it was a great reaction that you got to something you did, or approval from someone whose opinion really mattered to you. What first gave you the confidence that you should be doing this and you could belong if you continued to work harder at your storytelling?
I remember calling my brother. The way the North Carolina School of the Arts film school was set up, your first 2 years, everybody takes, classes in multiple disciplines. And then after your second year, you apply for, and the school kind of committee decides who's going to go into which discipline. And directing was the one everybody wanted to go into. It was a small school. I think they only accepted about 8 directors the year that I was there. And I remember my freshman year calling my brother, Ben, and saying, hey, in 2 years, if you hear that I got in the directing program, I think that means something. I think that means I might have a shot at this. And then my junior year, I went to Cannes with an internship from Kodak in the American Pavilion. I waited tables at the American Pavilion, and someone tipped me in a Palais ticket and to an evening screening. My mom had bought me a tuxedo at Dillard's, and I went to the Palais and I sat in the nosebleeds in my tuxedo, and I looked down when the lights came up at the end, and I saw these filmmakers down there who had just made a film, and I just thought, oh my God, like like this is it. Like I'm here, like I'm a part of this. Again, growing up in Arkansas, it felt like I just needed these touch points to make it not even attainable, but just in sight, just so I could even see it from the nosebleeds. But the truth is, the real answer, and the kind of penultimate answer, is Roger Ebert. Roger Ebert reviewed my first film, Shotgun Stories, positively. He put it on his top 10 list of that year, which I don't know how the hell he even found it. We premiered in Berlin, and I went to every film festival I possibly could. But here's a guy that I grew up with in my home, a guy who sometimes I agreed with, sometimes I didn't. That was the beauty of Roger Ebert. But he was passionate about cinema. He was passionate about film, and the fact that he watched my first film and wrote not only a positive review, but then put it on his top 10 list. It definitely felt like a legitimate moment in my path.
So what would you say was the biggest obstacle that you had to overcome to allow you to turn these projects that influenced you into your own language as a filmmaker?
Well, I say this as a bit of a joke, and I've said it before in interviews, but it's true. I've been just unsuccessful enough to have the career that I have. My films, I think early on, had they reached a larger financial success or something else, I might have been swept up into a studio system that I wasn't prepared for. And what it really allowed me, over the course of my first 5, now 6 films, it has allowed me to develop a voice, which I can now say that without, choking on my own hubris. But there aren't many filmmakers. Well, one, there are not many writer-directors. They just don't grow on trees. But also, it's just really hard to have a point of view in this business. One, because it takes so much money and it takes so many people, to get these things made. It's really hard for filmmakers to develop this point of view, to develop a voice inside their cinema, because there's a lot of hands, coming in to adjust things. And I think I really benefited from having just enough success to keep making bigger movies, but really at each step kind of being left alone to make mistakes and find my find my own style, because you don't come out, no one comes into this world fully developed. It's what makes some first filmmakers, their projects jaw-dropping, because you wonder, how did this guy or this woman show up and do this? But I was given enough rope, to really define myself. It's not a specific anecdote of an answer, but it is true.
Well, was there maybe because you mentioned you were able to make mistakes, was there a mistake that you made that maybe you discovered yourself, or was picked up by a reviewer like Ebert, where you said, okay, I see, I learned there? I find I always learn with setbacks, not victories.
Yeah, sure. Midnight Special is a film that I'm extraordinarily proud of. I think it's my most personal film. It's the one I get the most emotional about, and I get emotional about all my films. I love these things, and I really was reaching for something narratively in terms of the structure of Midnight Special. I wanted it to be like a Russian nesting doll in reverse. So you start with this thing, and then, this other story gets added on top of it, and then on top of it, then on top of it. And it kind of keeps growing. And I wanted to keep the mysteries going. As soon as a question got answered, I wanted another question posed. So I was thinking a lot about kind of the narrative structure of it. And thematically, or at least emotionally, I don't know, the theme doesn't really reach the level of what I'm talking about, but emotionally, I knew I was on solid ground because it was about my son, and it was an emotional touch point for me that I could very much check in with, at any point in the process. It's really about a parent coming to terms with the reality that we don't control or have no effect on the safety of our children, ultimately. And so I felt really good about that. And when that film reached its emotional climax, which is really what I pay more attention to than plot climaxes, I felt very satisfied in the cut of that movie. And then first the script and then the cut of the film. I realized kind of after the fact, it's not so much about critics, I suppose, but it's really just kind of listening to people in the audience. Everybody else just wanted to know what the hell these shiny people were doing and what this other dimension was. And I never really had much concern for it, to be honest. The point I'm making is that the miscalculation was the power of the practical things happening in that film not being aligned with the emotionality of it for an audience. And as a storyteller, that and that's 4 films in. Pretty big learning lesson.
I remember seeing Bike Riders in Telluride, and what I enjoyed about it is you captured characters in an interesting moment in the world, but that was the exploration, was the characters, as opposed to a specific A to Z narrative arc. Tell me what burned in you to capture these people, from Jodie Comer's character, she did such a great job, to Tom Hardy, to Austin Butler, to Michael Shannon. All of them were just riveting.
It's how the characters were first introduced to me in Danny Lyon's book. It's a book of photographs, but the texts in the book are just interviews. They read like monologues. And they're great monologues because they're not about anything. These people are just talking about anecdotal moments of their lives, little pieces of their behavior, little bits about how their minds work or how they've been treated or how they feel about the world, but they're not trying to tell you a story. They're really not, it's not like, hey, let me tell you about this bank robbery. It's like, they're really just trying to tell you about themselves, which is a remarkable thing to come across as a storyteller, because that's the stuff that matters. That's the stuff that really makes character worthwhile. I remember going through the edit, and inevitably you're trying to make the film tighter and play as well as it can. And the studio's saying, what if we just trimmed some of these side characters, some of their side thoughts? And I don't throw them under the bus here, because it makes sense. There's a world where you make this movie and it's just Jodie, Austin, and Tom's characters, and you really stay with that kind of A storyline, but it doesn't give you the breadth of the community, the breadth of this outsider group. You need all those little stories and all those anecdotes, and some audience members will be up for it and some won't. But the hope is by the time you get to the end of it, you feel the full breadth of this outsider group. And this isn't one of those moments, to your previous question, where I'm recognizing a fault in the film. It's really what you're doing is recognizing what the hell it is you've done, what you were really attracted to and what was important in this one, and bringing out the breadth of these characters and these anecdotes about the way they see the world. That was really important to me.